again for being here, everyone.
All right, thank you, Mr. Clancy. Good morning, everyone. We're happy to have a lot of our parents and community members with us this morning. We are looking at this session as just the first of several sessions. As you know, the governor a couple of weeks ago created a requirement by which districts were supposed to post certain things on their website, which we have last week. But another component of his mandate was that schools should engage the community, having 3 sessions designed for parents, community members, also having sessions for staff members. We've already conducted a couple of those staff member sessions. This is the first of several of our planned parent and community sessions. And I just want to point out the fact that this has never been for us about meeting a minimal standard. Yes, the governor has said that we need to conduct these sessions. Our plan is to go well beyond the minimal requirement. We have this session. We have a session at 1 p.m. this Thursday and another session at 5:30 this Thursday. Our plan is to continue scheduling these sessions as we lead up into the start of school. So there'll be more information coming out, but look for additional opportunities to be involved with these types of sessions where we can provide updates on any important critical information regarding reopening, and also continue to answer the questions that you have. I will say that hopefully within the context of our presentation, we will answer a lot of the questions that people have had. That's not to say that there are, as Mr. Clancy indicated, questions that still need answers. We understand that this is going to be an ongoing process. We're in unprecedented territory, and we will continue to be answering the questions that you pose to us in the coming weeks. And I assume well into the school year, we're going to continue to have to work together to make sure that we have answers to the questions that emerge. As Mr. Clancy indicated, we're also like to thank Mr. Eric Feist, who's the Director of Public Health for Madison County. He's here to support this, our process, and if need be, to answer any questions that may come up. I would just like to say we appreciate his help. We've worked with him on numerous issues over the past several months, and I will say that he and the rest of the health department have been invaluable sources of information for us as we've navigated through this process. So thank you, Eric, for being with us this morning. We briefly wanted to just highlight some of the factors that framed the priorities for our reopening plan. I know that many of you have had a chance to already see the larger document and the summary document and the videos we put out, but we thought it was important to at least touch on a few high points. Some of those priorities included providing an opportunity for every student, K through 12, to have the opportunity to have in-person instruction. We understand that there are unique needs of students at every grade level, and we did not feel as if we could prioritize certain areas over others. We felt like as a foundational base schedule that we wanted to be able to provide every student at least a couple of days of in-person instruction. I also want to point out that when we looked at how many students could we accommodate at any given time, that was completely driven by what is our capacity to safely adhere to the social distancing standards that we will strictly abide by. So for example, if we can only fit 8 students or 9 students or 10 students in a particular classroom, and maintain that minimal 6-foot distancing, or in some cases, 12-foot distancing for certain classes like phys ed or chorus, then that's what it will be. We in no way we're going to compromise those standards in order to get more students in. So the schedule, the base schedule of 2 days for each student was driven by our ability to safely abide by those standards. And those were the number of days when we broke the numbers down that we could allow for students to be in the building as a base schedule. Another key priority was that we needed to have the ability to move between a remote and a hybrid situation. We know that the way that we start the year may not be the way that we are functioning a month or 2 or 3 or 6 into the year. And so it was a priority that we could move seamlessly between our remote schedule and a hybrid schedule if need be, and hopefully at some point to be able to move fully back to a regular full day in-person schedule when the situation allows. We also felt that it was critically important that we had flexibility for those students who required fully remote learning. We have the capacity for that. We're working with families based on the survey responses we've received, and we'll talk more about those survey responses momentarily. We also felt that it was important that based on certain students' needs, they may need more than just that base 2-day-a-week schedule. So for example, many parents have been engaging us in conversations about what does that Wednesday schedule look like, that flex day. That was an opportunity for students to potentially receive additional in-person instruction. Additionally, students with special needs may even go beyond that to a 4 or 5 day in-person scenario, if that's what makes sense. So this is an ongoing conversation with families. We knew we had to have a base schedule in place, but we also knew that it was important that we had flexibility so that we could talk with and work with families. We felt that it was incredibly important based on the survey responses we received, based on the feedback that we got from students, from families, from staff, that we had a specific schedule for students to work with. So we will, whether in a hybrid situation or whether students who are fully remote, students and staff will be following a specific schedule to provide that necessary structure during the course of the school day. And finally, as we said earlier, critically important that at the heart of everything we do, it's that we're going to follow the guidance from the CDC and the Department of Health. That is something that is non-negotiable. We're not going to cut any corners. That serves as the basis of everything we do and guides all of the decisions that we make. So wanted to talk about this briefly, especially since Mr. Feist is on the call with us today. The governor made a couple of weeks ago the announcement that schools needed to be engaged in testing and contact tracing to some degree. And we wanted to reiterate the fact that we will not be performing testing on site. We are not a health care facility. We do not perform testing, nor should we be. We also are not the lead agency on any contact tracing that occurs. We are certainly a partner in the process. The Madison County Health Department, who we've worked with on numerous occasions already this year, takes the lead on the contact tracing process. We work with them to help to fill in the dots and to provide information as they work through the process. But it's important for everyone to understand that that we're just a piece of the puzzle. We do not run that process. We will defer to the healthcare experts. We will defer to Eric and his team and we will be a good partner working with them through that process. Now, a lot of the questions that we've received so far have centered around what is your plan or your policy for if a student tests positive or a staff member tests positive. And if you recall back in March, we lived through that scenario where we had staff members test positive, and we were pretty transparent in our communication to the community. I wanted to talk about this briefly because I think this will answer many of the questions that have come in. The answer to that question of the what if this happens or that happens is not a simple question, and there simply isn't a simple answer to those questions. It all depends. The answer to that question is it depends on a lot of things, like the duration of contact, like the proximity of contact, how close was somebody to an infected person, how long was the duration of contact. Those sorts of things all drive what the next step will be. So it's not as simple as just saying an infected person was in school or around somebody, therefore a classroom is quarantined, or the school is shut down, or there are a variety of factors, all of which we will work through with the health department in a responsible way to have the outcome that is necessary to keep people healthy. And I know Eric is on the call, and I think this is a good spot to ask him if he'd like to add. Eric, would you like to add anything based on what I've just said, or clarify anything?
Actually, I think you posed it very well and correctly. I just will reassure the listeners that we have been meeting with the school superintendents for, I think, over a month now on a weekly basis to go over plans to address these type of questions. And in terms of the testing and contact tracing, the schools have been very cooperative in working with us to make sure that we have systems in place to coordinate those activities. And Sean was right in terms of the contact tracing is our responsibility, and every situation, every positive case is unique and to itself. And so it's hard to answer general questions when the situations are going to be very specific and unique to that particular time and event. So, but rest assured, we go through a very rigorous process to understand who's been exposed, who's been in contact, and then making sure those individuals are placed into quarantine or isolation, depending on that, and that we individuals are informed and kept abreast of what's going on to make sure they're well aware what's happening and what happens next. So.
And Eric, your staff actually reaches out to those people. So I know some people were worried about, well, how do I know? Or, I know your staff has been pretty direct in reaching out to people when there is an issue. They will get to them and give them their instructions, correct?
Correct. Just to give a little brief synopsis of that, if we will find out, more than likely, we will find out before the school even if an individual has tested positive. And when we find out an individual tests positive, we contact them immediately and interview them and do a case investigation. It helps us understand who they've been in contact with, when were they in contact with them, how long was the contact, and whether they were wearing masks or not, and some other things. Based on those discussions, we then identify potential contacts, and we reach out and talk to them and indicate that they've been potentially exposed to a positive individual. We don't tell them who. We have to maintain confidentiality, but we do let them know that they've been exposed to someone and that they need to go into quarantine. So if you haven't heard from us directly, then you have not been directly exposed or involved with this. We also understand, though, there are some instances where we may not be able to identify all the potential exposures. And in those instances, we would work with the school and where we would put out a press release or some type of announcement saying that, anyone that was in here at this certain time on certain date should be monitoring for symptoms. If they have any questions, call us. I think with the schools, though, I'm much more confident that we'll have a better understanding of who has been exposed, just given in this kind of closed situation, we know who's been where. So I'm actually a lot more comfortable and confident with the schools and our ability to contact trace than any other situation we've been in. So.
All right. Thanks, Eric. And again, we appreciate your help. Again, Health Department has been working with us every step of the way, and we appreciate your help and collaboration on this. All right, I'm gonna ask Mr. Clancy to take us through what was as many of you have participated in several surveys, and we've had overwhelming response in those surveys. And so Mr. Clancy is going to take us through some of the things that we learned as we went through that process.
Morning again, everyone. And I apologize, I should have introduced myself at the beginning. I'm Chris Clancy, and I'm the Assistant Superintendent for Instruction and Special Programs. So as Mr. Becerra said, we have, as you know, distributed several surveys to different groups of folks, staff, students, and parents. And we did that for a couple reasons. The information I'm going to share with you today is a really brief summary of a lot of the really great feedback that we got from parents with one of our previous surveys. And the questions were, in this survey, were around remote learning. So sort of what was the experience like for you as a parent with your child or your children from March to June? And we asked those questions in order to learn and in order to make that better, knowing that we were going to have a similar kind of learning experience for our students this fall. So I'm sharing a summary with you. These are some things that parents shared as particularly challenging with remote learning. So just quite honestly, the first one kind of being a parent, getting their children to do the work. Getting kids to do, homework at home sometimes is a challenge, but getting them to do a full day of schoolwork is definitely challenging, and we acknowledge and recognize that. Inconsistent scheduling, Mr. Becerra mentioned that in one of the previous slides, that not having a routine at home and not having a routine established by everyone at school made it challenging for parents to know when they need to support their students or when they need to make sure they're on a particular meet or they're ready to participate in a lesson. We acknowledge that was challenging, and that is an improvement that we're going to make. Certainly reconciling your own work schedules with your children's schoolwork. So, parents have shared, I'm an essential worker and I work all day, and I need to then come home and help my children with schoolwork. Again, acknowledging that that is a challenge, and we certainly want to work with parents going into the fall if that continues to be a challenge. Trying to help parents understand the work. So, very quickly, parents became teachers. And again, we understand that, and we'll, going into the fall, do our best to make sure that whatever work we're providing to students that we're expecting them to do relatively independently comes with some support from staff at school. Tracking due dates, that kind of goes along with the schedule piece, I think, a little bit. Tracking what was due when it was due was challenging. There were parents that said, I want to stay on top of my son or daughter and make sure they get what they need to done, but it's hard for me to know when that is. So please share that differently and better. Also, just different expectations by buildings and grade levels and teachers made it challenging if parents had multiple children in different buildings. They were kind of following different sets of expectations at each of those buildings. I will say the same about communication methods. So those are things that we've worked with our committee to try to streamline and improve and make better. So, we'll do our best to address all of these things. They're very helpful pieces of information. And I think you'll see some improvements going into the fall. So I'm going to turn things back to Mr. Becerra. He's going to share some information about how learning is going to look a little bit different for our students and staff this year.
And again, to reiterate what we had already spoken about, students will be following the specific schedule. That was a significant difference from what we experienced last spring. Attendance is going to be taken whether a student is participating remotely or in person. That is a critical requirement that we know who is participating each and every day. We had a lot of questions about grading, and we wanted to assure people that the standard grading practices will resume. So students will be getting a grade just as they would have as we started last year. That is the practice that we're going to return to. We're going to be talking to families more about a virtual code of conduct. We understand that we're operating in a different time. We understand that our situation presents unique challenges. And to make sure that everybody is on the same page, we're going to be working with the staff and students and families so that we understand what are some of the basic expectations for those students when they are learning from home. What does that environment need to look like? So a lot more to come, but there will be more information about that prior to the start of school. And finally, it's going to be critically important that streaming occurs. We still want our teachers to be able to engage and interact with our students. And that, in order for that to happen, we have to have the ability to stream and to be able to interact with students. At times, will we be using taped videos or things of that nature, of course. But that still could be one of several components of an effective instructional plan. And certainly a critical piece of that is the ability to engage in real time. And so there will be much more to come on that. And certainly what that looks like at each grade level and building will be relayed more specifically by the principals and teachers as we get closer to that time. So I think Mr. Faustino is going to take us through some of the important issues related to instruction at the K-6 level. So Mr. Faustino, can you pick it up from there?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Brissett and Mr. Clancy. So this is briefly just a snapshot of the K-6 highlights of our structure and expectations. So in terms of the elementary, the K-6, we will be focusing on the core subjects of math and ELA, as well as writing integration. So you're going to see a lot of the social studies and science will be integrated into our writing, which was really what we wanted to do anyway. So this is a great lead into kind of what our thought process is moving forward. Our class size is going to be reduced by half for in-person instruction. So there'll be a safe amount of students in each of the classrooms, depending on each of the classrooms. I can tell you we've taken a look at most, if not all, of the classrooms, and we can range between 10 and 14 students to comfortably and safely put those students in a classroom with a teacher, with personal spaces or workspaces. So those class sizes will be reduced by half. Given the feedback that we've been provided since March, all students will follow a very specific schedule. It may not be based on time as a regular school day, but they will have a specific schedule so that both students and parents can stay connected, and it's more consistent than it was from March through the end of the year. And we're pretty excited about the specific schedule to be able to support parents and students at home. As we call the Wednesday or the flex day, we're often at the K-6 calling it the Raider Day. That is our Wednesday. That's that 1 day of flexible instruction. And that will be for students who need academic intervention services. That will be students who will require OT, physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech. Those are some days that we can tend to have a little more flexibility and get students everything that they need. Another important part of that Wednesday is our social emotional support. We learn through a lot of feedback that our students really struggle through isolation and not being with their peers. And we know that the social emotional learning is going to be a big part of that Wednesday as well. So that's really supporting all students. So we're excited about the flexibility of that Wednesday. The The biggest challenge that we have is really how do we manage the at-home or the remote academic engagement when we're not in school. So it's going to be really important that we are taking attendance. We will be giving a lot of feedback about their participation. And as Mr. Becerra had said, we will be having a code of conduct or a set of expectations for students when they are in school and at home. And the first couple of days when we come back to school, we're going to be spending a lot of time with students, connecting with them, but also letting them know about our expectations for in school and when they're at home. So we know this is a process that students will have to go through, but we want to be clear in our expectations for their engagement when they are at home and in school. We do have the option as the year progresses, to increase the amount of days, and you can see that as one of the final bullets there. There's an option for increased in-person instructional days. As Mr. Becerra said, once we get our base schedule and we really understand our numbers and safety, we can continue to build, and that's ultimately our goal. As Mr. Becerra often says, we go through things in phases or layers so that we can do it the right way and that we're not in a rush and that we are continue to be driven by our safety instructions. And then there's an option for a fully remote instruction when necessary as well. As Mr. Becerra said, we feel that we can move back and forth depending on what our numbers are and how our region is functioning, that we feel like this structure can translate back and forth. If we are to go home at some point, or if we are more fully in person, because the rules and regulations change a little bit, we feel like we have a consistent model for the elementary there. So I guess after the K through 6, it's important that we also see the congruence for our 7-12. So I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Altabello for our 7-12 highlights.
Thank you, Mr. Faustino. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us this morning. It was really important for us in the district to try to create as much normalcy as possible in an abnormal environment. And so one of the things that we were really trying to do is trying to keep a schedule. And in fact, at the secondary level, keep the period by period schedule so that kids knew when and how to follow along, and that even when at home or remote, even when in person or remote, they would still have that schedule to follow. We're hoping that provides some kind of like normalcy and structure to the day. So as has been mentioned, we are splitting the students in half, A through L and then M through Z. And they're going to be joining us 2 days a week. So if you're in an A through L cohort, you're going to be coming on Mondays and Thursdays. If you are in the M through Z cohort, you'll be coming on Tuesdays and Fridays. The other 2 days that are opposite those, that they will be remote instruction, where students will follow that schedule. On Wednesdays, very much like the elementary school, we do have some flexibility with what Wednesday looks like. With this new schedule, we do lose our 10th period time. And our 10th period is often used for teachers to get in touch with students and to provide some remediation. It was also time for students to request to be with teachers and to ask questions and to get some extra help. So Wednesdays, we're hoping to structure that. We are structuring that in such a way where, like, when that particular student has that period with that teacher, that student, if need be, can request time to be with that teacher, and or that teacher can request time to be with that student. So we're trying to maximize that day while at the same time providing the necessary flexibility and additional supports to all students, including students with special needs who may need a little additional assistance. And then, as Mr. Faustino had mentioned, the social emotional piece for students to simply reach out, touch base, ask questions, and connect. We thought that was really, really important. One of the things that our schedule does do, because we did try to stick to our regular schedule, is that it does create some nice options and opportunities to go back and forth into these models when or if we need to. So we can be in person, we can be remote, and then we can come back full bore based on the schedule that we're created. And so that was very important to us, so that we didn't have to go back and forth and create confusion. There have been a lot of questions about BOCES, And we are in the middle of gathering all the information. We got some information last week. And in fact, I reached out to BOCES last week, and we haven't had the conversation that we need to have to clarify a few things. But essentially, BOCES is going 2 days a week. We are providing transportation. There was a lot of questions about whether or not students can drive themselves to BOCES. And the answer to that is yes. However, we are going to require some permissions from both BOCES, so that BOCES is aware, and for us, so that we know who is driving, what time of day. And the other piece of that is that, we certainly do not want students, just jumping into cars with each other and driving, back and forth to BOCES. So we'll have some, proper permissions and some forms to fill out for those students who are going to drive the BOCES. Certainly more information to come on BOCES. I'm anticipating this week, if not today or tomorrow. So we'll get out that information as that comes, but BOCES is happening. Students will be attending, and students will be able to provide some of their own transportation. Having said all of that, there's certainly much more to come. We appreciate everybody's patience and understanding as we work through all of this, as things do change on the daily. We'll do the best we can to communicate those things to you, and to make sure that we're all on the same page. So with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Clancy, who will talk about special education.
Thanks, Mr. Altabello. So just a couple items around special education. There have been some questions that I just hope to bring some clarity to. So the first is, regardless of the learning plan that families choose for their children, in person or hybrid or remote, special education services, which for Canastota include things like integrated co-teaching, 15-1 special class, and then all of the related services that are listed here, speech, OT, PT, counseling. Those will continue to be provided. Clearly, we will have to develop a schedule in order to support both kinds of learners. So that schedule will likely not look the same way that it does when we have all of our students in session at school. But please know that those services will continue to be provided, and our students will continue to maintain access to our special education staff. And I'll say the same for the accommodations and modifications that are listed on IEPs and 504s for families. Those will also continue to be provided with the sort of the footnote that we'll have to work with families in order to perhaps modify some of those things if the child is completely remote or even partially remote in a hybrid kind of situation. But those will continue to be provided to our students. And as I think actually everyone who's spoken today has mentioned there, we have, we're making a significant effort to provide additional learning opportunities to our students with disabilities, which does include additional instructional days at school. So there was a question recently in a survey that asked parents of students who have an IEP for a 504 if they were looking to have their child attend for additional days. And we're reviewing those responses right now, and hopefully finalizing them sometime this week to know what we're able to support. So the requests have been made, and now we're at the point where we're making sure that we can accommodate some of those given some of the requirements that have been discussed around distancing and safety. So if your child, or if you did make that request for your child, we will be in touch very soon with what we're able to provide. I'm going to now turn things over to Mr. Congdon to talk about athletics, clubs, and co-curriculars. Mr. Congdon.
Thank you, Mr. Clancy. As Ms. Clancy said, my name is Stan Condon, and I'm the Director of Athletics and 11th to 12th grade Assistant Principal. As many of you know, fall sports were supposed to start next Monday, August 24. The start date has now been postponed until September 21st. Please know athletic directors and leaders across the state recognize the importance of high school athletics, but please know also that our safety of our student athletes is our biggest concern. If we can't start sports in the fall in September, there has been some talk about starting sports after January 1st, and that's all sports, fall, winter, and spring. We'll have to revisit this later, but again, the focus on these decisions will be a safe return for our student athletes. If you do have, I know there's not a lot of answers right now with athletics. The only thing the athletic directors and schools know now is that the start date will be September 21st. But if you do have questions, as always, feel free to email me, call, or use the chat below. In regards to our school clubs and extracurricular activities, we're going to revisit these opportunities once school starts. Some of our clubs that we have had in the past may now be remote, so they won't look the same as they did in previous years, but we'll do everything we can to still try to maintain some of these programs. When we make these decisions, again, safety will be our focus, what we can and can't offer. And hang in there. I know many, we're going through a lot of changes. All stakeholders are dealing with changes right now, and we are in this together. In the meantime, let's keep working together, stay positive, and let's be Raiders strong. And now I'm going to turn it over to Nick Panuccio with an update on nutrition.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Nick Panuccio. I'm the Executive Director of Finance and Operations. So I just wanted to give you some insight on the meal program. I want everyone to know that our summer feeding program ends on August 31st. After that, we will go back to how we normally are and serving meals to our free, reduced, and full pay students. So our meals are going to be served in small group settings. Students will be socially distanced when they eat. Meals available for pickup for remote students only. So students that are just remote, if they need to pick up meals, they are able to come down here and pick them up. We will have a window open at one of our cafeterias. Free and reduced and full pay breakfast and lunch will be provided. Breakfast will be sent home. No breakfast is going to be eaten at the school. So I'll give you an example. If a student is leaving on a Thursday, they don't expect to be back here on the Monday. We will make sure that they have breakfast for Friday and for that Monday before they come back to school. They will get it on their way out the door. Lunch will be eaten when students are in person. The same process is going to be done when they leave. Just as I said, if they leave on a Thursday, we'll send them home at lunch on that Friday. But they'll be back in on that Monday, so they will eat lunch in school. But when they're not here, lunch will be provided, given that they're free, reduced, or full pay students. So I'd like to transition over to transportation and hand it over to Cindy Clark, our Director of Transportation.
Ms. Clark, you may have to unmute.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Thanks, Mr. Panuccio. As he stated, my name is Cindy Clark, Director of Transportation. We've been going through a lot of changes throughout the summer with the distancing and the cleaning. And what we need to do is we only can have one student per seat, which takes us to 21 per bus. Also, however, we could put a little bit more on the bus as long as the families that ride together will be sitting together. So there's a potential for 25 students. Masks will be worn with all students and any staff that's on the bus, driver, bus attendant. We will be cleaning the buses. All seats, high contact areas are cleaned after each run, after the first run and after the second run. So at the 7:30 hour and at the 9 o'clock hour, the same for again in the afternoon. We'll be sanitizing the buses with a sprayer that's called BNC 15. That will be sprayed daily on each bus. The contact to disinfect is 5 minutes. We will use a Clorox 360 machine, which we will clean weekly. So at the end of every week or on Wednesdays, I haven't chosen which particular day at this point, we'll be using the Clorox sprayer. That disinfects immediately upon contact. So we're looking to pretty much sanitize the buses every single day to eliminate any germs that could possibly be there. The routes are going to look a little different this year due to splitting in the cohorts of the A through L and the M through Z. The routes, you may not be on the same bus number. We may not be in the same area. We're working very hard right now to try to get those routes accomplished. The times could also change due to having smaller amount of students on the buses. We may be there later than normal. As soon as we get them up, we're hoping to get an email out or some information out to everybody with what their bus numbers would look like. We're also requesting at this point, due to the limitations on the buses, we're requesting that there should be one pickup and drop off at the same location in order to try to make the runs run a little bit more smoother and more efficient. So for an example, if your child, if you're on a Monday, Thursday schedule, and on Mondays your child would get on at the babysitter's, but on Thursday at home, we would like very much if we could possibly have the location picked up at the babysitter's for both of those days, as it would just eliminate the having one bus with that student and then not being able to pick up another student on Monday at that particular location. As of right now, there will be no after-school bus runs. This is due to having only 21 on a bus and having my elementary at that particular time that the high schools would have the 10th period. That would overload the buses at that particular point in time. If there is any questions whatsoever, please feel free to give us a call in the transportation department. We will try to answer any questions we can as soon as you call with the information that we have on hand at that point in time. And at this point, I'm going to turn it back over to Nick Panuccio for the safety protocols.
Thank you, Cindy. Welcome back. So the most important thing we want to do is just to make sure that all the students are safe. So we're going to show a video in a couple minutes that we put together last week to show you some of the things that we're going to be doing throughout the course of the day while the students are here and not here. For some of our safety protocols, daily student and staff screening protocols for symptoms are going to happen. They're going to start at home. So we're going to come up with a process to make sure that when the students are in the classroom, we have properly screened them. Masks worn by students and staff in accordance with CDC and Department of Health guidelines when distancing not possible. Nurses are seeking clarification on acceptable face coverings right now. The refusal to wear a mask that will be treated as medical or disciplinary. We have to make sure that the masks are on at all times. The maximum number of students in a classroom is dictated by a 6 or 12-foot standards. This was talked about by Superintendent Bissetta earlier. We're not going to cram kids in a classroom. We're going to make sure that we follow the rules and they're going to be socially distanced properly. So I'm going to turn it over for the rest of the slide to our Director of Facilities, Nick Campbell. We'll talk about some of the things that him and his staff have been doing over the buildings throughout the course of the last few weeks.
Thank you, Ms. Panuccio. Hi, everyone. I'm Nick Campbell, Director of Facilities here at Canastota. Some of the bullet points here of maximum number of students in classrooms at 6 foot. We've been working right along with everyone, removing some items that can make those distances and help keep the safeness throughout the classrooms. We also have signage throughout the building on proper distancing, hand washing, wearing of masks, what signs, how to sneeze into your elbow, and how to also, again, hand washing. Hand sanitizing stations throughout the facility are within corridors and office areas at the moment. As we move along, they will increase throughout the hall. We do have a nice number of extra masks and gloves throughout the facility. So we've been many months of gathering and getting proper PPE for everyone in our district. And again, we'll have proper hygiene training for all students and staff. Thank you.
Okay. We wanted to give everybody a chance to hear from each of the both the elementary, secondary level buildings, and also from each of our departments. We referred to the video that we produced. We have created a cleaning protocols video, but in the interest of time, we're going to hold off on that. We wanted to make sure we had a chance to, as much as we're trying to answer questions, and we'll continue to post answers to questions on our frequently asked questions area on our website. We wanted to save some time to be able to take some of your questions right now. So please, if you get a chance, and if you haven't already seen it, go to our website and check out the cleaning protocols video. I think this will help people understand some of the extensive work that's happening to make sure that we're keeping our facilities safe. We're going to continue to release videos on various topics, some on the academic side, what our schedule is going to look like, for example, at the various levels, to also talking about some of the social distancing protocols that we have put in place. So those will continue to be rolled out in the coming weeks. But at this point, I think we'd like to, again, as we've said, hopefully we've answered some of the most frequent questions that people have been posing to us. But Ms. Henner, do we have any questions that we've received that we'd like to give people the opportunity to ask at this point?
Yes, actually, I've been keeping track of them, and I apologize if I have missed any along the way. I've got a few people that would be willing to speak at this time to address their question. A lot of great questions. So the first one I'm going to direct to Megan. I'm going to ask Megan to unmute her computer, and she would like to ask a question about the teachers that will be assigned for remote learning. Megan, are you with us? Let's see. Okay. So not sure if we lost her in some capacity, but I'm going to ask Megan's question. She was wondering if there was going to be a dedicated teacher assigned to the remote learning cohorts. Does anybody want to take a stand on that?
I think part of the answer to that question is I think it looks different depending on the level that we're talking about. And for example, at the secondary level, I think students can still follow along remotely because we're going to have the ability to stream those lessons. And since as the classes are split with half the class in person one day, the next day they would be learning remote, that's still an option that students could follow along. Would you agree with that, Mr. Altobello?
Yes, sir. That's kind of the idea behind the model, so that we can have some synchronous, which is like, in person, in time, learning going on at the same time, whether in person or from home. So that's the hope. That's the idea.
Now at the elementary level, that's going to look a little bit different. And so we're in the process of assessing numbers. For example, what are our numbers? We appreciate the feedback through the survey process the parents have given us. We're trying to get a better handle on exactly how many students at each of the grade levels and what their particular needs are. And that's going to drive the staffing and who's allocated to be working with remote students. So it very well could be a case where a teacher is assigned to working with a cohort of remote students. But I don't know if Mr. Faustino or Mr. Tobby or Ms. Carnahan would want to weigh in on that as well.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Bracetta. Yeah, there's a lot of factors that will go into those final decisions in terms of staffing. Many of us still have a few numbers out there that we need to solidify of who's going to be in person, who's going to be remote. But our initial thought, and really the prevailing thought that we have at the elementary, is that there will be a dedicated teacher that will be assigned to the fully remote, which were the students that will be staying home, and then the opposite cohort when they're at home that day. So they'll be interacting with not only one point level teacher, but they'll be also supported by other teachers as well through different services. But the prevailing thought is that they have a sort of like a virtual classroom teacher, a point person that they can develop a relationship with and that knows their particular needs, that it's not a, it's not a buffet of teachers, because I don't think that would be good for students. So we're really looking to have a point person for each of those students to be able to connect with.
Thank you. I have another question from Mr. Brown, Mr. Tim Brown, a question regarding the new Visions program and BOCES. I think BOCES in general. So Mr. Brown, are you available to ask your question?
Yes, I am.
Thank you.
My daughter's in the New Visions Law program she's been accepted into. And now ordinarily that program is Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, where they basically job shadow in different departments in Madison County. And then 2 days they meet in a conference room in the DSS building for the academic work that's associated with it. My question is, if she's doing the 2 days the 2 days, what is it? She'd be Monday, Thursday, I think, and
Right.
then in person. I'm confused as to and the other days they participate by Zoom. Now she certainly can't job shadow by Zoom, so I'm just wondering if special accommodations are being made on this, because the job shadowing will happen in county office building, the offices. Where there'll be masks, social distancing and stuff each and every day, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And then they just do the classwork, again, with social distancing in the conference room, depending on how many people they have, how many students they have. But they could social distance there she's going to lose a day of the job shadowing basically under the current plan here, but the current plan, I assume, is primarily for the school buildings. So because of this is an off-site program, are they making accommodations for that so that she doesn't lose a day of the job shadow?
So as we kind of noted, we are in the middle of figuring all that out. And one of the benefits of the BOCES program is that we may have some flexibility, especially in that New Visions program. So the answer to that is going to be predicated upon what BOCES works out and some of the processes and procedures that they have worked out with some of their collaborative businesses and organizations. But like I said, I would like to think that as we move forward, that we will be able to maintain some of that job shadowing thing on the same level of frequency as we have in the past, because of the fact that there are different procedures going on in those buildings, and provided that particular student does have transportation, that would certainly make it easier, because I know a lot of the New Visions kids did drive themselves because of their job shadows. So there's a good chance that can still occur. So I can't answer your question in certainty right now, but I do think that's a possibility.
So am I still on mute?
No,
Yep.
we can hear you.
So we're basically awaiting BOCES' decision on that, I guess.
Yeah, so BOCES came out with some information last week, but I need to have a personal conversation about specific issues, even things like this with the people at BOCES. So like I said, I called early last week. I wasn't able to touch base, so I'm hoping to touch base either today or tomorrow at the latest, and get some answers to some of these types of things for BOCES students and parents.
Yeah, we realize there's sort of as we've mentioned several times, there are layers to this process. For example, when we were trying to establish our base schedule for students, that was step one. We realized that BOCES needed to make decisions based on what all of the schools in the region were doing. So in a sense, they had to take a step back, see what they were working with, and create their plan. So it's a process we're going through. They needed some time to be able to construct it based on what the schools of the region were doing. And as Mr. Altabello said, we'll continue to work with them, but information will come in layers. And we hope people understand that given the timeline we've been working on, things change very much from day to day. And because of that, as we said, we want to be able to continue this process, not only for the 2 scheduled meetings that we have, additional sessions for parents this Thursday at 1 and Thursday at 5:30. We also have a session specifically for students at 3 o'clock. But so please join us if you're able to at those sessions, but we're going to continue to update our frequently asked question section on our website. So refer back to that frequently. We'll look at all of the questions that we've been having. We will continue to schedule other sessions in the coming weeks so that we can have a more personal interaction with you. Some sessions could be, in fact, dedicated you know, almost entirely beyond any updates that were occurring, we could dedicate entirely to answering some of these questions in real time. So we're trying to be respectful of time. We said the session would be an hour. I know people have to go in different directions. We appreciate all of the people who've participated in the session today. This is just the start of what will be multiple sessions. As we said, we look forward to continuing to working with you to make this year the best that it can possibly be. Please join us on Thursday if you're able to, and also please join us on future sessions as we finalize those dates and publish those dates and times. So at this point, it is 10 o'clock. Hope everybody has a good day. Please continue to send us questions, and go Raiders.